While Brandon Aiyuk is all the talk, we ask the question not only where is he going, but can the 49ers win the Super Bowl without him? We discuss that and a lot more on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, James Rapine, let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast. It's your Wednesday host, Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers and James Rapine of Locked On Bengals, bringing you your daily dose of everything going on in the NFL, the biggest stories all week long as we go through all the different hosts that host this show. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all the daily content that comes out from all of our different hosts of the Locked On NFL podcast. And today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. James, the Brandon Aiyuk saga is not over. It just keeps on going and going and going. And I would know because I cover the Steelers and they have been quote unquote rumored to be in big quotes on this Brandon Aiyuk trade talk since like March. And frankly, James, I said it in March, is like I would be tired of this in April. We are here in August, and I am still tired of it, but we are still here. And I think it's interesting because there's all these different rumors, right? Brandon Aiyuk, wants to be traded. He's posted videos of him talking to other players saying he wants to be traded or that he's not getting treated right. And there's a video of him, not hugging John Lynch and what that meant in the body language. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? Now there's teams he won't be traded to. I want to lead off with this first, James, because I think this is the biggest thing that you hear from our guys on Locked On Niners with Brian and Eric. I think the biggest thing is that a lot of people are not stating enough. I know everyone's excited to see Brandon Aiyuk go to a new team and who might land him, but I do feel like the Niners have put in a lot of work to try to keep him because he's a big part of what they're trying to do right now. And I'm not 100% sure that they get back a player that's as good or as important to their Super Bowl chances right now in any trade. If they trade him, they're probably getting draft picks or a player that might not contribute as much as Brandon Aiyuk. And I'm not 100% sure the Niners are willing to go down without a fight there unless they're getting some crazy return from someone.
Yeah, there's really only one scenario I've seen where you could argue that the 49ers' chances of winning this year are better without Brandon Aiyuk. And it doesn't extend their window as long, but Amari Cooper is a better player than Brandon Aiyuk today. I believe that. Will he be a better player in 2 years? Probably not. And
Right.
So that's the gamble if you're the 49ers. But outside of that, how does this make them better? Because you drafted Ricky Pearsall. Like, I was in on all these wide receivers as part of Locked On Bengals ahead of the draft. And it's not like Ricky Pearsall was this guy that was viewed as an instant plug-and-play game changer. Good player. Certainly someone that could fit a really good offense like the 49ers. But it takes time sometimes. It took Brandon Aiyuk time to get comfortable in San Francisco, comfortable with Kyle Shanahan's offense and contribute regularly like he has and develop into the player that he's become. And so you have that guy now. The Super Bowl window is now. I think that's why it has been the delay when it was rumored in March and then it extended to April and now we're in August, because deep down, when you look at the suitors that have been mentioned, whether it's the Browns, whether it's the Steelers, whether it's any of these other teams, the Patriots that are reportedly in, the San Francisco 49ers are the best fit for Brandon Aiyuk. I believe that.
Yeah.
And the 49ers' best chance of winning this year, unless they can get a really nice pick and Amari Cooper, is the same. It's with Brandon Aiyuk, because they would still have to pay Amari Cooper. He's older. And so there's more risk involved. You know what you're getting with Brandon Aiyuk. You know he fits in the offense. You know how he fits. It just, to me, I don't know why they need to break up. It's like that couple that makes sense and it works, and every piece of it, at least on paper, works. And yet there's been rumors for so long now that it does feel like a breakup is almost inevitable.
We keep hearing it. And I get there's there's concerns and everything. But I think that there's also the look at the Niners. They have a lot of paychecks that are coming down the road. Guys that they'll need to extend, guys that they'll need to re-sign, and that could be tough. Plus, in 2025, they're kind of up against it with the cap, with the numbers that they have to be. So, I think that's part of the issue is that the Niners, they kind of want to give themselves more flexibility moving forward. I think that's another part of what they're going through is trying to figure out how to keep this crew together as long as they can to keep an actual Super Bowl chance in hand, because they got the defense, they got the O-line, they got the playmakers, they got Brock Purdy, but again, Brock Purdy's on a rookie deal. Like, how much longer is that going to work? Where if you want to make him a paid member of your offense. So I think that's kind of behind it right now, is that they have these guys that they're really excited about, and they'd love to keep Brandon Aiyuk. But if Brandon Aiyuk knows, hey, I can get top tier wide receiver money, that's probably not money that the Niners can afford to spend in the coming years if they want to keep this team together. Now, if they want to break up how this team looks right now, that's sure. But that's, again, how much, what are you shaking up to keep him at wide receiver, especially when you also got Deebo Samuel? So I think that's the situation that they're in. But I'm kind of with you too. Like, Brandon Aiyuk, if he gets, let's say he plays on the tag this year, he's still getting a lot of money. Would it behoove him to take one more shot with the Niners and then try to test the waters again next year, or would he be risking himself, getting hurt, messing up his chances to hit in the open market? I think that's the big thing here.
Well, he's fifth year option, right? So they could still tag him.
Right, exactly. They could tag him, but I think that with that tag, he'd be. I think they'd be in an even better position to kind of negotiate, because again, in 2025, like 2024, the Niners' salary cap looks like it's like, if you looked it up, like, oh wow, they have $52 million in space. They could easily afford him right now. Yes, they could, but that's not the issue. Is right now they're worried about 2025, where they got a lot of numbers that they're going to have to crunch to keep the team together. So I think that's the issue that they're running up against, and I think that's where the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk could come to. But I think it's going to be interesting to see all the different teams that supposedly won them. We've seen reports now that say that the teams in the front running are the Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. We've seen countering reports where people say, "Oh, I think the Patriots are out because Brandon Aiyuk doesn't want them," and things like that. We've also seen that the Steelers and the Commanders were in play, though. As a person who covers the Steelers, I don't think that they're heavily in play. I think that they have simply put in the offer to the Niners, be like, hey, this is our line. We're not budging. If you get something better, congratulations. But if not, give us a call. And I think that's kind of where the Steelers are standing here. I wonder to you, what do you think who do you think is probably the biggest asker right now and the most desperate to get a player like Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, I think that's the question. That the best fit and in which teams should be pushing for a player like Aiyuk the most. And that is what we call a tease, Chris. We will answer those questions as Brandon Aiyuk Watch continues on Locked On NFL.
Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful, and Game Time is where you can book tickets to your favorite sporting events and more. Game Time sponsors this show, and Game Time is the best play to get all the tickets to all your favorite events, and it's including baseball season, because right now baseball is in full swing in the summer. So get tickets to see your favorite ball club play their next game with Game Time. Whether you're in Pittsburgh and you want to see rookie phenom Paul Skeens pitch on the mound with the Pirates, or you're in Los Angeles and want to see Shohei Ohtani be a world sensation for the Dodgers, Game Time has got you wherever you go. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee that can't be beat, you can also save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, and so many different events. And the best price guarantee means you'll always find the best price. If you find tickets in the same section low for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So go to the website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You mentioned Brandon Aiyuk watch, and I think it is interesting which teams are the most desperate. And there are honestly a few that I think should be really desperate. Brandon Aiyuk instantly becomes wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh, I think. I think he becomes wide receiver 1 in New England. And so those are two teams, no doubt. Is he wide receiver 1 in Cleveland? Sure, if it includes an Amari Cooper deal or trade or swap. So there's no doubt that he can be the bona fide wide receiver 1 in these landing spots. But I got to be honest with you. When I look at these spots and I'm Brandon Aiyuk, like if I can get, let's just say 28 million per from San Francisco, do I really need to go to New England or Cleveland or Pittsburgh for 32? Where they all have shaky quarterback situations. They all have questions on offense. It doesn't mean that the offenses won't be good, but there's questions on offense. And the 49ers, you know what you're getting. You're getting a team that's likely to make the NFC Championship game year in and year out. That's what they've done. And if you can get to that Final Four, you may mess around and win the whole darn thing. So to me, it's really tough outside looking in to say, all right, send me to Cleveland because I want to get paid this much, or send me to Pittsburgh, or send me to insert wherever, because these destinations that I've seen at least are not better than San Francisco.
Right.
And I get it. The cost of living in California is high, all of those things, the taxes. So there is a bigger gap there. I'm not saying you gotta take less, but it's a better situation than these other situations for sure.
Yeah, I think that the Niners, and I've said this before, I'm like, if I'm one of these teams and I'm looking at needing to sign, because that's the thing, Brandon Aiyuk, they want he's negotiating with these teams to see what kind of deal he'll get after he's traded. It's not just about getting traded for this year; it's about getting traded and then signing him to this big deal that he wants. He's reportedly has turned down $27 million a year from the Niners. If he's turning down $27 million a year from the team that drafted him, that he grew with, and then he's been to 2 Super Bowls with at this point. I feel like that's what if I'm one of these other teams that hasn't been to 2 Super Bowls in the past 4 or 5 years, that hasn't been it hasn't developed him and developed this relationship with him. What is he going to ask of me? And I think that's where I'm kind of at. If I'm I think that's where the Steelers are kind of at. It's like, look, like they would love to have Brandon Aiyuk, but not for no $30 million a year. I think that's the thing, is especially because like for example, and there's a lot of these other teams, they're considering how they're building too. Like, if you're signing Brandon Aiyuk, you're probably not making another big signing on your team somewhere because of unless you've drafted poorly and you just don't have those guys coming up. But like the Steelers, they got to pay George Pickens in a year or two, and George Pickens just had 1,100 yards with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph at quarterback, and a struggling offense. And he's shown he can be. Here's the other thing: if Brandon Aiyuk comes to Pittsburgh, he's the more experienced wide receiver, but it's not a guarantee that he'd be wide receiver 1 on that offense because George Pickens is a bad dude. But if you look at, say like you said, the Browns. The Browns, they're paying a lot of their guys already, so they're in even more different of a position. I think the team that always interested me in this conversation was the Commanders, but I think the Commanders they're under new management. They're not trying to be bullied early days into this new regime into taking a player that, maybe, that they really love to have, but that, they're saying like, hey, this ain't the Dan Snyder days where we just make crazy trades that just, and feel the repercussions of it without reaping the benefits. I think that the problem that the Niners have in trying to find a trade partner is that everyone's looking at that price tag and saying, Brandon Aiyuk, you're a top 10 wide receiver, but you're not top 5 wide receiver. And that's top 5 wide receiver money. And I'm not sure I want to overspend on that unless I'm one of those teams that I'm right at the cusp and I just need to get over the hump to be a Super Bowl contender. Maybe the Bills, if they had the money, that would have made more sense. But like these other teams, like the Steelers are going to be competitive this year, but I'm not sure Brandon Aiyuk makes them a Super Bowl contender this year. So that's where I think that the problem with the landing spot question is that it's not the right suitors to be aggressive right now for a top 10 wide receiver, but not a top 5 wide receiver.
And well, it's complicated because you have to pay him and you have to give up a decent amount of draft capital. And you're right. Teams just aren't willing to do both. That's a stretch. I do see one team, though, that hasn't been talked about. I'm just going to throw it out there. Just because they've been the team that's been really aggressive all offseason, including signing Calvin Ridley. With DeAndre Hopkins nicked up, supposedly going to be okay for week 1. Are we sure the Titans wouldn't see what they could do? They have cap space, $24 million. Like, you could work out that extension. They already traded for L'Jarius Sneed. Like, they clearly are willing to be aggressive and add proven players. I don't think so. I don't think they would do draft capital plus contract as well after doing that with Sneed and some other guys. But is there a dark horse team like that could go get Brandon Aiyuk? I do wonder. I do wonder if there is, because you're right. The teams that have been mentioned aren't perfect. And I think the team, just to go back to the tease, that would be the most desperate out of all of them, probably the New England Patriots. I think they thought they had Calvin Ridley and they didn't get him. And now you're looking at things and it's, you got a couple rookies that I think are promising. And that's really it at wide receiver. And so, yeah, I think maybe that's the team. If I had to name the team that pushes the hardest, it's probably New England. And we're going to get to it. Do they have a quarterback? Is their rookie and Drake Maye ready to go? You know, if you're Brandon Aiyuk, that's a risky bet.
$78.2 million is the Patriots cap space next year. So like they're in a position where they should be able to find money to make things work. I mean, and again, the Steelers are in a similar situation. They have, I think the top 3 teams with cap space for 2025 as of right now are the Cardinals with $86.9 million, the Patriots at 78.2, and the Steelers with 78.1. So I feel you on Tennessee because, you know, next year they don't have a ton of cap space, but they have decent cap space. They have workable. They have $27.5 million. So they could be one of those teams there, James. But at the same time, does Brandon Aiyuk want to go there? And also, if they're paying Calvin Ridley next year would be a $28 million cap hit. Do you want to have him and Aiyuk on the roster at the same time? Unless you really believe in Will Levis and he's going to be the answer, and you just need to give him 2 superstar wide receivers and everything's going to be fine. And I guess
that's the beauty of a rookie deal, though, of
a
rookie quarterback, you know, and so it does give them a little flexibility there.
I think that's the thing, is who wants to use their flexibility, because flexibility today, and something that I think you and I talked about in recent weeks, I think wide receiver is very much the position where people are learning you don't need to overpay for someone who's not the elite of the elite when you can draft another wide receiver who could rise up pretty quickly. Wide receivers are getting drafted all the time. Wide receivers are coming up in this league all the time. And I'm not saying that you find Brandon Aiyuk every year, but I mean, this past year, there were so many exciting wide receiver prospects that everyone was like, oh, you got to get this guy. You got to get that guy. He could be this guy. He could be that guy. And I think that's where teams are looking at, is like, you know what? I think we with the way that we're structured and the other people that we got to pay right now, it's worth it to maybe take that shot next year in the draft than to try to pay for this guy right now and make it so our window is this right now period before we lose 1 or 2 stars because we signed this guy.
Yeah, it's totally fair. And honestly, I think it's accurate. Like, I think you mentioned top 10. He's probably borderline. Like, do I think he's going to go dominate New England? Like, is he a guy that's just going to, regardless of where he's at, just thrive? You mentioned it. George Pickens might be better. And physically, I'm not going to debate you there. One is certainly more accomplished than the other, but one has been in a much better situation than the other.
Right.
And so how do you gauge that? I think it's one thing if Brandon Aiyuk was a free agent, he would get paid, but to give up a ton of draft capital or valuable assets plus pay, honestly, this sounds like if I'm the 49ers, the one deal I would consider is that Amari Cooper deal, where you ask for premium draft picks and get Amari Cooper, who today I still think is a better player than Brandon Aiyuk. It could change. If you do that, I could get on board. Outside of that, I'm just not there. Is Drake Maye there? I think that's where we should transition, because the preseason is here. These rookie quarterbacks are here. These young players that we will be watching, we're going to get into those coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Maybe the Patriots should look on LinkedIn for a wide receiver and get some wide receiver help. I'm sure Brandon Aiyuk would be happy to put his profile on LinkedIn if it means him getting the right trade and getting paid. But on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should too. And right now you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
We're back here in the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, James Rapien going over things. We just talked a lot about Brandon Aiyuk and who's going to get him. Let's talk about people that are actually playing games in the preseason this week. The first preseason game of this week, it comes down Thursday night, 7 p.m. in Foxborough. The Panthers take on the Patriots, and it's two young quarterbacks that I'm really looking at here. Bryce Young with his new offense, with Deontay Johnson, with all the different things that they've been trying to do to revamp and say, hey, his year two is going to be better in Carolina, but also in Drake Maye, the quarterback that was drafted extremely high by the Patriots in this past draft class. We've heard rumors that he's not looking too great in camp, that it's been easier on other guys that have been there, and that he's not exactly standing out. They're saying that he looks, he's kind of looked like Mac Jones 2.0. And there's a lot of people nervous about how that situation plays out. James, it's just the first game of preseason, but sometimes that tone can be the tone that lasts for a while, and one sets a bad note with the fans, but also kind of shows, hey, this is where these teams are starting out this year with trying to work with these young quarterbacks.
Yeah, for Drake Maye, I think it's about the physical. Do the physical traits play right now? Obviously, he's still developing the mental aspect and what it takes to be a quarterback in the NFL, but you want to see him. I remember Cam Newton. And I watched one of his first preseason games in person, and he was awful. But physically, you were like, oh, it's there. And then by week one of the regular season, he had gotten enough reps to where he was putting up big numbers on a bad team. So for Drake Maye, the physical part, that's what's concerning about Bryce Young, right? Last year, he just looked small, and you can't fix that. You can fix the processing and seeing and getting used to life in the NFL to a degree, but the physical element is a big one. And I think with Drake Maye, when I looked at these top quarterbacks in this class, why you go with the Drake Maye over, say, a JJ McCarthy is because you think physically he's going to be different, that he has a higher ceiling. And we'll see, because the Patriots were kind of torn between trading down and taking McCarthy, staying pat, pun intended, and taking Drake Maye. And so this is the first step there. Doesn't mean I need him to go 20 for 24, but I want to see him look the part physically. And I do think that that's important, especially for these young guys as they tread water and try to figure out life in the NFL.
Make a big throw that's a highlight of the night, and you could complete 5 of 20. And people will look at that one throw and be like, all right, that's the arm that they were looking for. That's the mobility that they were looking for. I think that's the thing that you want to see from Drake Maye is that early standpoint there, and shows that, like, hey, yeah, like the potential's there. It's going to take time. And let's be real. No one's expecting the Patriots to rise up this year. You know, they got a new coach. They're just out of the Belichick era. They got a lot of rebuilding to do. So if they can just show the potential there, that'd be fine. I think Bryce Young's the one that needs to look a little bit more composed after his first year. That's going to be interesting to see how that offense looks. But James, there's a lot of games going on this weekend. What are some other games that you're looking at over the weekend that should catch your eye preseason?
Yeah, I think, by the way, the Panthers, could they somehow make a Brandon Aiyuk trade work? Their cap space really isn't there this year, but just thinking out loud. Anyways, I'll be looking honestly at some of these starters. To me, it's always interesting. Like the team I cover, the Bengals, they're going to play Joe Burrow. And coming back from the injury, I mean, what a storyline that is.
Yeah,
across the league. I mean, if he looks, and he's looked good in camp, but if he looks good in that one drive, and I assume he's only going to play one drive, then it's like, okay, well, the Bengals they're going to be back to contender status, or does he struggle going into they're going to play the Bears next week and have joint practices? I think that's a big storyline. You mentioned before we started recording about CJ Stroud, and all the buzz from Houston camp is how Stroud and Diggs look like they are just on.
Mm-hmm.
And so are they? Does it translate? I think that's why you play a veteran tandem like that. And I know Stroud's only in year 2, but you play him at quarterback with a veteran like Diggs for that exact reason, to get in sync and get on the same page ahead of the regular season. So some of these contending teams making it interesting, even though it's just preseason week 1, because they're playing their starters, because they're playing guys that we expect to see in mid to late January with really pivotal playoff chances on the line, or playoff runs on the line. So 2 guys I'm watching for sure.
Absolutely. CJ Stroud, I'll literally be watching CJ Stroud because he'll be at Acrisure Stadium playing the Steelers this weekend. So I'll be covering that game and getting a close look at things there. And I think it'll be interesting because the Steelers, their defense, they've added a lot of pieces to it. But I also wonder who the Steelers will start on defense. TJ Watt is kind of like, they don't need to really see him. They might let him rest for the preseason game. Minka Fitzpatrick's also another guy I think they don't necessarily need to see too much of. But on the flip side of that, I think it's going to be interesting who you see at quarterback for the Steelers, Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has been, the presumed QB1 since they signed him, even after they traded for Justin Fields. But Justin Fields has taken all the QB1 snaps in training camp because Russell Wilson got injured, during right on the conditioning test that the Steelers had, and so Russell Wilson's maintained when we've talked to him, hey, if this was a game, I'd be playing, but they're letting me rest. And I think that the Steelers are being cautious with him, but I think they're also using this as a time to see what Justin Fields has. And Justin Fields does look a lot more comfortable after 2 weeks of camp than he did at the start of camp, at the end of mini camp last month. So I think it'll be interesting. I think we're just peeking behind the curtain here on our show. We're recording this very early Tuesday morning. So I say that with this caveat. I think if Justin Fields is still running QB1s today when I drive out to Latrobe, PA to see Steelers training camp today, then Justin Fields is starting this game. But if Russell Wilson, he's been in pads every day, but they just haven't let him go full contact 11 on 11. He'll do some 7 on 7. If he goes to the full today, then I think that you see some Russell Wilson. But I think the Steelers are confident that he has gotten his hold of the offense and that he'll be fine. So it might be a Justin Fields day Friday night against CJ Stroud, and that could be interesting. 2 young quarterbacks, both looking to show where they are. CJ Stroud building off a tremendous rookie year. Justin Fields with a new team trying to revamp his career. Certainly some things to watch there. Other things that we're looking.
The state of Ohio will be watching that one if that's the case. I'll put it that way.
That'll be wild. Other things we're watching for here. Will we get to see Caleb Williams finally, showing up against the Bills? I'm intrigued about that one. Jaden Daniels against the Jets with the Commanders. A lot of young quarterbacks that I want to see take their first steps. Don't have some big plays, look really confident. I'm also interested to see, how the Chargers look, with Jim Harbaugh with the new coach and what this offense looks like. I'm just excited for football, man. It's back preseason. The Hall of Fame game, I never really consider that real anyways. I know that there's always like a little bit of highlight there, and some third string guys. You're like, man, that guy was a sleeper draft pick, but preseason football, now we're starting to really see some training camp battles. They're gonna take place. The things, if you've been covering the team, you're gonna see this take place, and then we'll be able to start evaluating these guys. I'm just excited overall, James.
Yeah, I think you're right about the young quarterbacks. Like the Bears, could they be this year's Houston, where they have the young quarterback, they have the weapons, and suddenly they just make a huge leap? Could just because we're mentioning it, Will Levis. What if he takes a step forward in an AFC South that I think is kind of open, right? And so, there are a lot of storylines to pay attention to that I'm certainly excited about. Jaden Daniels, whoo!
Mm-hmm.
I put it like
Richardson's back.
No doubt. I put it like this. The Patriots wouldn't be discussing who's their starting quarterback if Jaden Daniels fell to 3. And I think one of the things that they can be mad at Bill for is winning one too many games last year that cost them and dropped them down to 3 versus 2. I mean, it's what a difference it is where you have Drake May, who may end up being good. I'm not poo-pooing Drake May, but I really think Daniels is going to be a player right away and make an impact right away. And obviously we feel the same about Caleb Williams. So excited to see these young guys as well. Would be nice if Daniels, Williams, some of these NFC quarterbacks, these young guys would step up and play at a high level, because the AFC is just quarterback dominant, and the NFC needs to catch up a little bit. So we'll see if they can.
Absolutely. This has been the Locked On NFL podcast, getting you ready. Come back tomorrow. We'll have guys getting you ready for some more of these preseason games and how things are panning out for them. From Chris Carter and James Rapien, thanks so much for watching the Locked On NFL podcast, listening on your favorite apps. Tune in tomorrow for another episode right here from all of our great hosts.